Hello, my name's Karen Edwards and I'm a storyteller from Carnlough in the Glens of Antrim. This story is one of my own, and it's set at a place called Parlour's Port, which really did exist, a house beyond the boundaries of Carnlough and between Carnlough and Garran Point. I hope you like it. Kate looked out of the window at Parlour's Port. She was anxious to see that the harvest moon was shedding a clear path of light across the dark sea. There was far too much illumination for what they had planned that night. She could only hope that old Alec's weather prediction that the cloud would come in around midnight would be right. Annie, her sister, was sitting in front of the fire reading a book, but she was so excited that she kept forgetting everything she'd read, and she knew she would have to reread the whole chapter the next day. "Did you bring in water and did you shut the gate?" said Kate anxiously to her sister. "Yes, I did. Don't be worrying." Kate was very envious of her sister Annie's perpetually optimistic attitude. Kate was the worrier. She had taken on the role of mother when their own mother had died 4 years previously. And now she was anxious about everything, especially the smuggling venture. It wasn't the first time that the two girls had participated, for they were part of a team of local women who engaged in smuggling to supplement the meagre income earned by their husbands, fathers, and sons with the profits from goods that were taken to Ballymena and sold in the market. Fine goods that came in boats from France, beautiful silks, wine, and tobacco. It brought in unnecessary pennies to help them. Tonight, Johnny, Kate's youngest brother, would be part of the smuggling team. She had been a mother to him since the age of 14 when his own mother had died, and Kate was really worried that anything should happen to Johnny. If it did, it would break her heart. But slowly, the wisps of cloud started to gather. One by one, they came in, building a thicker bank and blanketing the darkness. The two women were sitting in front of the fire in the little cottage where two cot beds lined the wall. That way, when they were sleeping, they could benefit from the dying embers of the fire. Tramp, the collie dog, was stretched out on the mat, oblivious to everything, and Kate sat rocking in the chair that her mother had used all those years ago. "It's time," she said. Annie and Kate got up. They wrapped up in their crocheted shawls and they set off to the caves where the goods would arrive. It would depend on the tide which cave was used. If it was a high tide, the goods would be landed in the upper cave. If it was a low tide, the one down at the foot of the cliff. But what was most important beyond anything was that they should not be detected by the water guard. The preventative water guard were a team of men whose sole mission was to stop smuggling along the coast. One signal rocket would draw men from as far afield as Larne and Cushendall, and they would all converge to catch the smugglers and take them to the station on the Largy Road. As Kate and Annie, sure-footed as goats, descended the path, Kate knew that it would be the lower cave into which the goods would come. It was a dangerous path, for there was no fence, but the girls knew it like the back of their hands, and confidently they went all the way down. Kate was anxious when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned round, her heart beating wildly, but then she saw that it was friendly faces, men and boys who had come from the village to help them land the goods. Down they went. She listened. She thought she heard the whisper of an oar in the water. They couldn't even use a light to signal in case the water guard detected them. But yes, there it was again. Kate hooted like an owl. "Twit, twoo, twit, twoo." And very faintly in the background, she heard the reply. "Twit, twoo, twit, twoo." Yes, the smugglers were there. They had timed their arrival perfectly with the tide. The water was just lapping over the edge of the cave. They reached out the sturdy boxes that were perfectly sealed in case they had to sit in the cave waiting for collection and the tide would come in and out over the top of them. But no, the boxes were handed hand over hand from woman to man up the path. And then, just as the boats were about to pull out again, a figure leapt over the gunwale of one of them. He planted a kiss on Kate's cheek, and Kate knew that it was her younger brother Johnny, now safe on dry land. He didn't speak, waiting for Parlour's Port for a more demonstrable greeting. They started to ascend the path. But then, the night turned to disaster. They were set upon by the water guard, ugly faces leering at them in the dark as they tied their hands roughly behind them and shoved them up the path. The boxes lay strewn, the tops taken off them, all the goods lying over the ground. They would never see the market in Ballymena. Kate, Annie and Johnny, along with all the others, were taken to the station on the Largy Road. Roughly, Kate was pushed into a shell where she fell on the floor with nothing to protect her but her crocheted shawl. She was worried sick about Annie and Johnny and what would become of them. About 2 or 3 in the morning, the grill on the cell door was pulled back and she saw a face that she thought looked familiar. She remembered that before her mother had married, she had had a true love, a man who had gone to sea and never returned. And giving up hope, Kate's mother had married her father and had her 3 children. The man now stood at the cell door, remembering. He looked at Kate. Kate McAllister. Aye, said Kate, scrambling to her feet. The eyes were the same. The man recognised them. They were still dear in his heart. Come on now, I'm going to let you out the side door. I never want to see you back here again. But what about Johnny and Annie? They're waiting for you. Be off with you now. And he bundled Kate out the side door of the station where Johnny and Annie were waiting for her. The two girls and their young brother descended the hill, down to Parlour's Port where they would get the kettle on the stove and make a pot of tea and recount the adventure that they'd had that night and how narrowly they had escaped. Thank you.